Thank you, everybody, for taking time. My name's Todd Walterman. I'm the Operations Director for Mayor Cruzen. Somehow, I guess, I got selected to kind of get this process started, and I just want to do a little introduction. I think we should go around and speak to everybody who's here and kind of give your name and what your position is here at the table. And we'll start with Barb. She's our lawyer.
Okay. I'm Barbara Birkicht, Associate City Councilor, and I'm on your agenda to speak today regarding meeting procedure, and it's nice to meet you and to see people that I know.
Good morning. My name is Tammy Holland. I'm the owner of THPR. THPR is a certified woman in my own, a minority-owned public relations firm in St. Louis. Prior to joining and forming THPR, I spent about 20 years behind the microphone as a personality for iHeartRadio. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Okay, my name is Greg Meyer, lifelong resident of the city of St. Louis, currently a resident of the 23rd Ward, and I'm a retired teacher. And I'm very interested in seeing development along the proposed Metrolink corridor. I grew up in the suburbs of Baden, and my parents both went to Beaumont High School, and my father grew up near Fairgrounds Park. In fact, he was actually born on Montgomery near Jefferson, and so his house has gone to the NGA. But after that, lived on San Francisco near Fairgrounds Park. Tells me how in the summertime when it was hot, they would sleep in the park because it was the coolest place, that you could be. And as I said, my parents both graduated from Beaumont, so that's an area that I'm very familiar with and an area that I love, and I want to see that area get some new development.
I feel cheated now. I feel like I need to go and give a shout out.
There you go, the whole story of your life.
To the 9th Ward, Benton Park. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yes, I'm generally very short and sweet. So I'm Alana Green. I'll be the director. I'm the director of CDA for probably 2 more days. But after that, I'll be moving over to be the director of the Housing Authority. So I'll still stay on this board. I'm really excited about being on this board. I was helping the mayor's office with a piece of it before I was appointed, so the neighborhood revitalization piece. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with the board.
Good morning. My name is Gary Gunter, former head of Radio 1 here in St. Louis. Recently left to start up a venture capitalist firm to launch entrepreneur opportunities here in St. Louis and becoming a franchise owner as well.
Radio 1? Was that a radio? Was that?
Yeah, 2 radio stations, Hot 104.1 and 95.5 FM here in St. Louis.
Cool.
I'll take my seat as well so everybody knows. I'm that individual sending you all those emails, as I noted earlier. My name is Jay Scheinman, Mayor's Office. This, of course, is a public meeting, so I am scamping around to make sure everybody's voices are recorded. Also, Donna over there is taking notes as well. So if I'm moving around, don't get distracted. Just do my part to make sure everything is as transparent as possible. So thank you.
All right, in the corner. Who do we have in the corner?
Jerry Connolly. I'm not on this board.
But you're concerned what?
I'm a concerned resident of the 8th Ward, just keeping track of how city expenditures are going.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Tracy Johnson. I'm a St. Louis city resident in the Baden neighborhood, lifelong city resident.
So we got some Baden representation here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you're looking for someone to give money to, so, okay.
Let's see what I got on me.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm Douglas Bay. I'm connected to St. Louis Public School District, the executive director of Full Service Schools for them. The other hats, life coach, strategic coach, pastor of church, sit on several boards and help people to make sense out of nonsense.
We need plenty of that.
Okay. So we can really use your help.
So I'm Jim Dwyer. I have been a resident of the city for 51 years, 1967. My wife and I moved into the Central West End. We've been there all that time. I've been a real estate developer most of my life, focusing on urban redevelopment. And starting about 20 years ago, I became a mediator as well, and so I do a lot of mediation work, particularly for the Postal Service in EEO complaint arena. And I am pleased to be on this board.
I'm Rich Bradley. I'm the president of the Board of Public Service. I am a lifelong city resident of St. Louis for 54 years. I am a 30-year veteran of the city of St. Louis, and I'm on my third appointment as president of the board, 2 from Mayor Slay and 1 from Mayor Cruson. And also a member of the Capital Committee, which is one of the items that is on our agenda for this board. This is a very important board because we have the task of listening to and delegating these items out that are written within the board's purview. And obviously we need funding for all these items, and that's why things passed. And so, I know a number of my colleagues are going to speak to our board throughout our deliberations, and I'm very confident that they are doing an outstanding job, like Alana. And I have great confidence that they will show you the exact same thing. So I would ask one housekeeping thing. Donna is taking notes for us today, and since we are a new board and she doesn't know many people in the room, if you wouldn't mind when you talk today, if you could just say your first name before you talk, then she'll be able to get on the notes who actually was saying what, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And who are you?
Donna Fisher.
Yeah, she keeps
Mr.
Rich out of trouble. Right. We all have somebody who keeps us out of trouble day to day, right? So, I'm just here to kind of kick this thing off. I want to give you a few words of wisdom. We were fortunate that the board passed out this ordinance. I'm going to pass them around so everybody has a copy of it. And, you don't have to read it now. Take it with you. Enjoy it. Some of you may already have that. But, that's how this whole thing started, right? We had the aldermen come up with this board bill to put this on the ballot, and fortunately in April of 17, our voters approved it. So now we have the board assembled, and now we're ready to start expending this money in appropriate ways, and that's what you're all here for. So I'm telling you thank you, thank you, thank you. Today's business is just getting acquainted, listening to Barb about the rules, how sunshine works. Many of you have served on boards. You already know this. It's going to be repetitive, but it's important that you hear it all so we don't get in trouble, okay? We all got to work together. We're in the public eye, so we just want to share that. At the end of this meeting, after you get to know each other a little bit, I'd like that you select a chair of the group. So for our next meeting, we have a leader of the group. That's probably the only real action item we have today. We're tentatively thinking about meeting again on the 28th of November. That's a Wednesday at 9 o'clock. I don't know if Jay's had time to run that by anybody yet, but it's far enough in advance. And then on the 28th, the dream would be, as Rich mentioned, we'd have presenters come in and present how this money would be expended. Okay, and before the 28th, you would receive a package in the mail. We'd get you something electronically that would kind of show where we're trying to go with this, to give you a little direction, some reading material before we get together. Is there any questions right off the bat, or do we just want to listen to what Barbara's got to say?
Is that over the 28th confirmed?
It's confirmed once we reach a consensus here. So if no one takes issue at 9 a.m. on the 28th of November, I will go ahead and send out an email and a calendar invite. Does anyone take issue with that day or time?
I'll be getting back on that date.
Okay.
From Thanksgiving travels.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can juggle around or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps a later time during that day be better?
Or the next day.
Okay. Does anyone take issue with the next day at the same time? That would be the 29th. Thursday.
Yeah, we have, there'll be about 20 people by the time we get the presenters in this group, so we need to clear up 20 schedules. So that's kind of what we're looking at to get this going. So it's not a simple task. Some of the presenters can be substituted. They can have, people behind them present. So, but
I'm good with the next day.
Okay.
I'll
put it
I
down
really want to
tentatively.
get that date out so we freeze up these calendars, so we can get maybe the better presenters in to share more,
I'll definitely send it out as a hold, and once I have kind of city folks confirmed, I'll send it out as a confirmation, but please keep in mind that date and time.
So we'll shoot for the 29th at, was it 9 o'clock?
Correct.
Right?
28th or 9th?
29th. We're going to move it from Wednesday to Thursday.
Okay.
If there's no more questions, I turn it over to Barb.
Well, this is my opportunity to meet all of you, and I'll be here as you meet, and I'll be a resource for you to ask questions, for points of information along the way. So we won't exhaust everything. We could give an hours long and I have, regarding the Sunshine Law and the Missouri Ethics Commission, but I've tried to, hit some highlights for you. And I'll be available afterwards if you have any questions, and in the future as you have more specific questions. So we already talked about your need for a chairperson. And when you think about that, the chairperson, what their role is, they would call the meeting today, and they would take the role, which we already did in essence, because we know who all is here, and they would chair the meeting throughout. They would serve as parliamentarian and ensure that all the proper procedures are followed during the entire meeting and move the meeting along from agenda item to agenda item. So everybody pretty clear on the role of the chairman? So first, we are going to talk about the Missouri Open Meetings and Records Act, that's commonly known as the Sunshine Law. It fundamentally requires that all of the records and all of the meeting of public bodies are open to the public. Jerry today is representing the public, so he's here. And it requires, if we're going to close anything to the public, it requires us to do an affirmative act to close a meeting, to close a record. And there's a list of only 21 occasions when you can do that. And we can go over that more specifically at another time. But this type of body, it would be rare for you to have to close a meeting. This body is a public governmental body. It's created by an ordinance of a public governmental body, and it operates pursuant to state statute. So it's clear that this law applies to you. And it covers all meetings at which public business is discussed, decided, or public policy formulated. So basically anything that relates to the performance of your functions or the conduct of your business is an open public meeting. The Missouri State Sunshine Law, I ordered some booklets, so you'll have them, but they're not in yet. But it can be found in Chapter 610 of the state statutes of Missouri, 610.010 to 610.050. It requires a quorum to be present for you to do any business. So today that would be at least 5 of you. So if we were at 4, we could have a discussion, we could talk, but you couldn't do any business except for just having discussion. You couldn't pass a motion, you couldn't act. We record the meeting, so there's a transcript possible of the meeting. All open meetings should be transcribed, but a closed meeting, if we were to have a closed meeting to talk about a legal action or a contract that's not yet been negotiated, that cannot be recorded without the permission of the public body. And I just remind you of that because that's actually a Class C misdemeanor. So recording that would be wrong.
All right, question for you. This is Greg.
Yeah.
I know that the Alderman committee hearings and their weekly meetings are videoed and you can see them online. Is there any policy that would include boards such as this in that? Because I know there are a number of aldermen who really want everything to be available online for the public to be able to view the kinds of things that go on, and I didn't know if there was any policy regarding boards such as this being videoed.
That's a good question. There's an ordinance that requires that certain meetings are recorded. Now, this board, it doesn't require that the meetings are recorded because this board didn't exist at the time that ordinance was passed. If this is something that you would propose to the board that you see, we have a communications division. If that's something that you want to happen, the board could discuss it, and I could tell you who the person that heads that division is. So.
Well, my thinking was that maybe that, Jay, since you interact with the board so much, you might have a sense of whether or not they would expect that this would be videoed so that they themselves could also, view what goes on and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that sentiment. One of the things we're doing to kind of comply with that is the audio recording that's going on right now. And the future meeting to take place will be in a room that has that capability, given that there's going to be a great deal of detail going around. So this should suffice for right now, but no, we definitely strive to be better at the next meeting as well.
Yeah, we're no stranger to technical difficulties. So. Just some highlights of the Sunshine Law. We have to post a meeting notice 24 hours in advance, according to the state statute. So the meeting for November 29th, exclusive of weekends and holidays, would have to be posted 24 hours. The mayor of the city of St. Louis also requires that all of the notice of the city's board meetings and open public meetings are posted on the City of St. Louis official website, so you can always go there. Today, we have Donna Fisher is taking the minutes.
Sort of.
Minutes have to be taken at every meeting of a public governmental body, and they're going to be a public document that's created. You're going to get a chance to review them, and they're going to be a public document. And they have to contain, at a minimum, the date and time the meeting convened and where the meeting was held, the time it was called to order, the roll call vote, including who was present, who was absent, a listing of other people that are in attendance in the meeting that are not the board members, and unfinished and new business items, and a brief summary of the discussion and any motions made and voted upon by the members. That's sort of, we didn't really talk about the agenda, but basically the agenda that gets posted online with our meeting notice, it has to be sufficient to tell the public what is going to be discussed, so they can know if they want to appear or be a part of hearing that. All votes, when you take votes, all votes have to be recorded. So the public needs to know who voted aye, who voted nay. So those also, it's very important to have that in your minutes. Any future meeting dates, times, and locations, if you determine them at this meeting, like the meeting on the 29th, that has to be in your minutes. The time of adjournment and the name of the person who took the minutes. And then those minutes will be approved by you at the next meeting, after you discuss them and have any changes that you feel are necessary. And we talked about the need for a quorum. The determination of a quorum is half plus one, so of 8 it would be 5. If you had 9, it would be 5. In the event a quorum isn't obtained, we can continue to meet, but you can't do any business. We talked about that. We should probably mention email messages as well, because if people are communicating electronically, if you're group texting or you're emailing or you're somehow communicating, if you talk to 5 members of this board, you have to send you have to record it as a public document because it's you doing business, and you'd have to send a copy, I'm guessing, to Donna Fisher. So she would have to retain that email and that email transmission as a public record. And it doesn't matter if you're using a city computer or your own phone or your own computer. It's not the means, it's the fact that you got together and you did something to talk about public business, and you send that document to the records custodian, and she will hold it. So, which
5 or more people?
Yeah, if you're talking with a quorum.
Okay.
Now, there's an exception if you're talking about where to have lunch after the meeting, or it's going to be Thanksgiving, let's have a turkey leg, or, that's not public business.
Okay.
But that's a pretty easy test. Everybody can tell what's social. So, this room is a good meeting place unless we know that there's going to be a big swell of attendance. The Sunshine Law requires us to have a place that is comfortable and it allows everybody to attend that is here. We couldn't say, well, now we're full and we don't have any more room. So that's just an overview of the Sunshine Law. Any questions about that? Yes.
I really have 3 questions in general. One about your statements, and then a couple other things. One is, can we get, could you send that out as an email of your talking points so that we could clearly have them?
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. Make a summary for you,
Okay, sure.
Actually, and we can also make it a policy, we can have a Sunshine Law policy, and you can adopt it, and then everyone will have that. So I think that would be something good for the board to do.
Right. That being one. The other is broader, and that is who determines the agenda, the items that actually will be a part that we are to address, that being one. And I'm asking this in a context because I also sit on the TIF Commission. And the secondary part is oftentimes the information is brought at the meetings, and it would be great, whatever's being considered could be emailed out as soon as possible, that it could be read and we could be aware coming in and puts them in a position to make decisions. So one, how do we go about determining the agenda? What role does this committee actually play in the process in that regard?
So Jay and I will put the agenda together,
Okay.
and I mentioned earlier that we'll email you out the documents before the meeting. So I would anticipate that we'll have something to you before Thanksgiving for the 29th meeting. So you'll have a good week to look over all the documents that are going to be discussed at next meeting, and it'll have an agenda attached to that.
Then what is the actual, should I say, authority of this particular board when it comes to final decision making? Is it advisory? Is it empowered?
It's advisory.
Yeah.
It's advisory, and so ultimately, what's going to happen here is you'll see presentations. This group will make a recommendation on what to approve. They'll ask questions and tear into what you hear and see, and then that'll have to go to the Board of E&A, the mayor, the president, and the comptroller, because this money has been appropriated by a board bill already, so it's ready to be spent, but it's not in the proper line items to be expended on individual action items. So it'll go to E&A, where the transfers will go out of the sitting account, the account that was appropriated in the specific places to be expended.
Let me ask one more thing, and I think I'm done, and that is, when you say advisory, are the only items that the E&A will consider are the ones that have been advised by this particular committee? Or do they just arbitrarily say, well, this was not part of the recommendation or advisory, we just will act on something else?
I have to lead on the city council here, but I believe that things could be added and things could be changed. Now, I believe that would be by the letter of the law, but in social acceptance, I believe you're going to see everything that goes through and becomes fact. We're not going to slide something in the end. In speaking to the mayor just yesterday, she says, don't just use this board for what you need for. Make sure you update them. So in other words, after you take your action, we will follow up with what E&A approved. And we will follow up with some type of reporting. It won't be weekly, it won't be monthly, but we won't leave you in the lurch and just call you next year and say, hey, we need you again. Okay, so we will be sharing how we progress through this. That is the intent. And I don't believe that intent's written anywhere, but that's how we treat each other.
The state statute speaks to broadly the boards, and it says, subject to approval of the governing body of the city or county shall consider, and it says the type of things you're going to consider: economic development plans, economic development projects, or designations of an economic development area. The board shall hold public hearings and provide notice of those hearings. And it goes on at the conclusion of that section to say the governing body or the city or county shall have final determination on use and expenditure of the funds. So it doesn't restrict the governing body.
So E&A can do what they want, I think, by the law.
Sure.
But we're socially respectable here, and I don't think you're going to see anything go to E&A that you haven't seen and voted on and participated in, because we like treating everybody nice. We don't want to fight because we're going to have you back here again.
One question on my end. This is Gary. Barb mentioned that our individual recommendations will be made public. Is that made public to the decision maker or made public to the public?
I don't know exactly what you're talking about now.
When we vote on certain things?
Yeah, your vote will be a public vote.
Exactly, and it'll be made public.
Yes.
Or open. Is that something that is shared with the public, or that's shared with the decision maker that you spoke of that would make a recommendation?
No, it'll all be public. Like, Jay has the opportunity where we could put this recording now online and share it with everybody. That's the general trend of what we do now, and I believe that's right by law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of our comments, everything we're saying here, can be put online and shared for a public setting. So everybody's yays and no's on action items will be recorded.
So that follow-up to my second question is, what are the rules and regulations as it relates to the media once they have public access to our votes, if they want to come speak to us about why we voted on? Are we obligated to talk to them about that, or how does that work?
Barb, I need your help here.
Well, I didn't come thinking that of having a media policy, but I mean, we were going to talk about ethics next, and I think that certainly if you speak publicly about something that you're going to vote on, to any group, including a media person, I think that we would have to recuse yourself from discussing that at the meeting. You would have to recuse yourself from voting on that, because the person coming to present wouldn't, it would create the appearance that they wouldn't get a full and fair, hearing.
So you're not obligated to speak to a media person. You're not obligated to.
No,
Okay.
you're never obligated to speak to anyone unless they subpoena you in a,
That's something.
No, we're not. We can't force you to talk to the media.
No, but
it was more your option. But yeah, no, we
Gotcha.
can't force you to do that. We can. We're asking you to volunteer for this board, or asking you to show up at these meetings, and the press may be there videoing you while you're doing your actions. But that's the extent of it.
Gotcha.
You can walk away and tell me you don't want to be on this board if you feel uncomfortable. Okay.
to that point, anyone in the press is, I guess anyone can tape a meeting if they want to come in and tape it, as long as they're not disruptive. If they're doing some conduct where you can't see each other, or where they're making so much noise that, you can't do your business.
Like my good buddy Elliot
that's-
Davis, shoving a camera right in my face. He would be asked to leave.
That would be disruptive.
Oh, we'll talk to him later.
But so people can reasonably tape a meeting. But I just took that opportunity to caution you that if you want to, to be able to serve and to come without, any appearance of bias, I would advise against, really making statements about things that are going to be on an agenda before you have even heard them. That would be an issue.
I think what Barb's saying is we shouldn't talk to the press and do this before the decisions are made by you.
Gotcha.
Right.
If they want to comment and you feel comfortable talking to them after the vote, that's up to you.
Gotcha.
Right, Barb?
Yeah, or a community meeting, you don't want to go to a community meeting and say, I really like this agenda item, but I don't like this one. But when you haven't heard it yet, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, I think you're going to be impressed by these individuals that are going to come explain this to you. They're going to really get down to the details, I feel.
And as, I guess the other, are we good with the sunshine? Any other questions about that right now?
This is Greg. I do have one question. When you said the governing body, that's who we are advising?
Well, the City of St. Louis is a governing body. This group is a public governmental body as well. So while the city is subject to this law, you are also subject individual, as a board.
So are we advising E&A, or are we advising the Board of Aldermen?
I think in this case,
Yeah. Now, I don't want to muddy this up a whole lot. I don't want to confuse you, but so this budget year is already rolling, okay? So we're doing this one a little different because these funds have already been appropriated by Board Bill 1. So that means the money's there to be spent. And that's why we're going to E&A to move it around this year. Ideally, this is all new to us, so we're getting into it midstream here. Ideally, what will happen is this board will meet again in March or April, and they will be making decisions about the FY20 budget then. And then that will become part of Board Bill 1 for July of 19 for our FY20 budget. We will actually meet in advance. So therefore, the governing body then would be E&A and the Board of Aldermen would go through the complete budget process. But because these funds have already been appropriated, we no longer need the approval of the Board of Aldermen. So E&A typically moves money around. If I need to, move money over to forestry from streets, we move that around every month. And that's basically what this is listening to what you have to say and then shifting the money where it needs to be spent.
The Board of Estimate and Apportionment, is everybody aware of what that board is? They are involved in apportioning funds, and they are made up of the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the Board of Aldermen. Those are also public meetings, so you can attend as a member of the public, and as an interested member of the board, you can attend those meetings. So
that I would expect to share the results of that meeting with you. Jay and I will put that out there. Whoever will get that to you once we have those results, so hey, I did this. I spent all this time listening to this. This is what I did. And they gave me the nod, or they scratched something off, or whatever they did, you'll see it. So you're part of the process.
I also wanted to just speak briefly about the ethics laws in the state of Missouri, basically found in Chapter 105 of the state statutes. The Missouri State Ethics Commission has been in effect since 1992. And I had a note that the city of St. Louis prides itself on providing an open, honest city government where the highest ethical standards are observed. And what did you call us, Todd? Something? Ethical fellows? I don't know.
Socially, you begin with socially.
Yeah.
That was very good.
We all gotta get along, right?
So as a member of a city board, it's your responsibility to report promptly and report publicly any potential conflict of interest that you might have. Right now, no one will have one because you don't have anyone in front of you making a presentation. If you had a financial interest, or your spouse or your close relative had a financial interest, some things disqualify you and some things just need to be disclosed. So, but you would have a right to, you would have to share that.
So let me give you an example of that. So some of these funds, we're going to ask you to move into a process for development where there'll be a request for proposal opportunity that'll be publicly bid out. And so if one of you had an interest in one of these companies that may be bidding on this, that could be a potential conflict. So when you get down to the details and we say we're going to seek people to provide help at rec centers or something, and you think, man, my wife, sells rec equipment or something, you got to think that out a little bit. This thing kind of goes down the road a bit, and you got to kind of put your life into it when you're doing it. And then Barb will be at every meeting. So if you have something that you're concerned about, it's 3 layers down, it's your son's wife or whatever, you can talk to her about it, and she can give you advice on that.
It's a fine point. This is Jim speaking. I'm focusing on the Baden crew. So suppose you don't have a financial interest, but you have a general interest in a part of town that you want to see prosper or come back, and you're lobbying for that territory to benefit from however these funds are dispersed. Where does that fall?
So, well, right now I can tell you everything that's going to come in front of you is citywide. There's not something labeled South Grand or Baden or anything like that. So all those groups
Well,
would compete
currently,
for
but
that.
I've read the ordinance a couple of times, and there is the opportunity for neighborhoods or entities to present proposals and requests for funding in support of those proposals. And they could be very specific territorially or...
Right. So that's another step. That's beyond your control. So you would put this money out and say, hey, I want to do this kind of action with it. And then there's another group of that goes through the RFP that makes the decision whether Baden gets it or Grand gets it. Okay. So you'd be isolated from that, I would believe. And I don't believe that would be a conflict. There's a whole other body. You would say, I want to spend $1 million, and I want to put it out there, and I expect 5 groups to get $200,000 each. Mm-hmm. And then there's other people, advisors would pick what 5 groups get it. So you're isolated from that decision. So if your wife or partner wants to go out and compete for that, I don't see that as a conflict. Barb?
No, but again, I think we would want to avoid any appearance of bias. So it wouldn't be appropriate if you went to meetings in that one neighborhood and said, I only am going to vote for things for this neighborhood to the exclusion of everyone else.
Yeah,
that would be inappropriate.
Yes.
So,
all right,
yeah.
Do you know the total amount of money that's been appropriated?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to get into that detail, but this generates $20 million a year, okay? And you have to understand 60% of that is going into the north-south. Okay, so the other 40...
The metro?
Yeah, the north-south metro. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got all these slang terms, I forget to finish my sentence. Yeah, north-south is purely metro.
20% is going to the north-south?
60% of the $20 million each year is designated by the ordinance, and the ordinance spells this out pretty clearly. It talks about 60 here and 10 here and 10 here and 10 here. So it's 60 and then 4 10s, and that's where we're at. So we'll get into I didn't want to mess this up getting into the details of the money. We'll send you that package. You'll have time, and then we'll have a lot of that next meeting is going to be fairly long because we're going to have I don't know, 8 or 9 presenters maybe. I didn't total on that yet. And they won't just present, you will be able to ask questions. Yes, Alana?
Will there be some sort of kind of scoring system? So if we see 8 different proposals, could there be some sort of standard form that we could use to kind of rate them?
I don't know that we get to that detail.
Okay.
But, you as a board will have an opportunity to say, hey, that section of spending there was very concerning, and I had questions about it, and let's do something different.
Okay.
And you'll be able to make those decisions. In my mind, I don't see us needing to go there.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be pretty straightforward.
Okay.
But that's up to you guys. You gotta be comfortable with your decisions.
Mhm.
Jay, do you see anything with that? We've talked a little bit about where we're going with this money and that. I don't see needing a real scoring system.
Okay.
I think you'll have a conversation and you'll get to a result.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I could see us saying when we're looking at these proposals, we'll look to make sure that they're qualified to do the work, and so
I think it goes back to what Jim said is you're gonna put a pot of money out there and there's gonna be a whole nother process on selecting who gets it.
Okay.
Many of these things that we're hoping you move forward will have a whole nother process of sharing across the city.
Okay. Makes sense.
I would think that your minutes will reflect something of your thought process. And that's one of the main duties of a board is just not to act arbitrarily or capriciously, but to act, with reason. So I don't know if there's a reason to touch. I just hit the highlights of the conflict of interest statute, and they're pretty intuitive. You can't use or disclose confidential information with the intent to result in financial gain for yourself, your spouse, your dependent child, your business. You can't use decision-making authority for financial gain, perform any service, act, or refrain from doing an act or attempt to influence a decision regarding that type of gain, and you can't favorably act on a matter that's going to provide you that kind of benefit. You can't share information that's confidential. And also the city of St. Louis and the state have a gift policy. So if someone that, I don't know that you would necessarily run into that in this board, but if someone wanted to give you a gift, there's a procedure for reporting that gift. So it would probably be a good idea to disclose that. It would probably be a good idea if someone wanted to give you a gift that was over $250 in value to disclose it to the board immediately and just let them know that was even happening.
I do have another question. You said there's a pool of possibilities that you will select from for the upcoming meeting. How did they become aware, and was it exclusively them, and how would someone else have been considered in that initial process, that initial pool of individuals? I'm just trying to get some clarity just relative to that.
I think we're going into the weeds a little bit. I'll tell you this ordinance, if you read through it,
Right.
it's the most specific spending ordinance I've seen in my 30-year history here. I mean, there's some of these things where, some of these categories where you won't even make a decision. The ordinance spells it out and tells you what to do. The infrastructure money, it says this money will go to the capital committee for expenditure. The one part says Slate will get this data person. It will get this. It will get $50,000 worth of computers. It spells it out. So there's not going to be a lot of that group stuff. It says you will appropriate money for a workforce development. So then that moves it into another process, and it lists a whole other group of individuals. And it's a different group of people that make these decisions. It's that one was really different. It had a rep from public schools, a rep from the Board of Aldermen, and then 3 of the mayor's appointees are on that board. Slate, CDA, and I don't know the other one. So you read this ordinance and go through it. It lays a lot of this out. Not everything, we still need you, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of it laid out here pretty specifically.
And actually, I'm not questioning the integrity of the bill. That's not really it. No,
I would. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, that's another conversation, but I'm speaking relative to how you're talking about open disclosure, that people are aware, although it may restrict itself to certain parties, but the awareness, public awareness from that end. That's the reason why I would ask, okay, there is a set of people who are aware now, and could there have possibly been some other people who were eligible to be considered if they were as aware as those who are currently aware? So that's a question. So you don't have to answer it, but it's just a question that could potentially come up on the part at some point. Well, how were they, and why was I not? What was the criteria of selection? How did they become? Those are the kinds of things that probably, for transparency's sake, probably need to be considered.
Yeah.
And that's just.
I think, yeah, and I think some of that comes to light as we move forward, you know. You'll see, somebody has a sale on hot dogs and you miss the sale, right? You hear about it from your neighbor and you go there the next week and get them, right? And so as we progress through this year and somebody feels like they're missed out, we have the public meetings, they're gonna hear about it, and you're gonna be appropriating money again in 6 months, you know? So, but I think it's been fairly open, and a lot of this, I'm telling you, 2/3 of this money gets re-advertised through a whole nother process, a whole public advertising RFP process. Quite a bit of it goes that way. We got to listen and hear these presentations, and I want you to feel comfortable, but I think it'll come together. I probably didn't answer it all the way.
Well, but that's okay. I guess you probably have some sense. I will probably have 1,001 questions prepared all the time. And just as
That's
a way of
good.
keeping us on our toes. I have plenty left, but I know we're on the clock, so.
No, I'm glad you're here.
You got 999 more questions.
Yeah, I do.
We don't want to rush this. We want you to feel comfortable, because you may have.
We might want to consider a cap.
And you will be able to pose questions to the presenters.
Right,
so.
right. I'm ready.
All right. Barb, are you done, or?
I believe I am. If anybody has a question
And
or
Barb will be
anything.
at every meeting, okay? And if she's absent, they'll have another city councilor here, and she's yours to use to ask one-on-one questions or public questions. She's here to keep you out of trouble, keep the city out of trouble. She's yours to use. So, talk to her, grab her before, after the meeting, or whatever you need to do, and ask her the weird, obscure question. You don't need to blurt it all out with a microphone on. So we're all here to play well in the sandbox together.
Can you clarify what the city councilor's office does?
Oh gosh, well, we're the legal department for the city of St. Louis.
Okay.
So we represent,
Okay.
Everything from
we sue
soup to nuts.
people, they sue us.
Yeah.
Claims, whatever's out there. I mean, I talk to a lawyer in our office every day with something that's coming in to get an opinion on what we need to do. Something new, something obscure. They will review these things before we present to make sure they meet the state statute. Okay, they will look over the law of the state statute, because the statute speaks very clearly to where the money can be spent on what. And I may have a plan put together that doesn't meet that yet. So that's why I need a little more time to get this right before you even see it. This money is very restricted on its use by state statute. If we don't have any questions, I don't know how we move into this, but I'd like to get a chair today if we could. Barb, do we have any idea how we do that protocol-wise?
we would take a motion.
I'm not part of this group, so I'm just kind of here.
I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yeah.
So, we're all gathered here. We really don't know each other very well. I think we'll know each other very well as we go through this process. I am a city employee. Alana is a city employee. So, in my mind, I would prefer that a city employee is not the chair of this board. And so I would hope that it's one of the selected people from one of the other offices that do that. And so we need somebody to mediate the meetings. It's a relatively basic task. I will offer to kind of help them along by having Donna here. We'll post the agendas. We'll make sure they get posted online, and so that it's really just a person kind of sitting in the chair and making sure that the meetings operate properly. And so what I would like to entertain, I'd like to make a motion that Jim Dwyer be our first chairman, and of course the group can decide for how long that is once you get into play, but we need somewhere to start, and so I would ask to make a motion that Jim be our first president.
Do we have a second?
Chairman.
I second Alana. I think you said a key word there, mediate, and as a part of his description of himself, he mentioned that he does that on a regular basis.
So now it's time for discussion, right? So you got a motion and a second, and now people weigh in and say, hey, that stinks, I wanted to be the guy, or whatever you want to say. Now is the time to speak up. And I think also we should talk maybe about the term of this. I mean, how do you change it out? So in other words, he gets tired of this, or he walks away, or these people get tired of him. How do they swap it out?
Well, you can make it an annual election. You don't have to. I believe that you all are on a 4-year term, so it certainly wouldn't be longer than 4 years. But most boards have an annual election.
Yeah,
I would be in favor of that. If I wind up sitting in the chair, I would be in favor of a relatively short term. I was thinking fiscal year, but it could just be from today, 1 year, and that gives everybody an opportunity to serve or not.
So would you like to amend that motion that you nominate Jim for a 1-year period?
That'd be President Bradley's motion.
Yeah.
That's correct. I would like to make amendment to my motion that I'd like to nominate Jim for a 1-year period.
1 calendar year?
Chairman.
Would the second agree?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like me to call a roll vote?
Sure. Is there any other
oh,
discussion?
sorry.
Nobody's really said anything. I don't know if you care. Or
So
somebody
we're
else.
saying today till next year today. Is
Yes.
that correct?
That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
So we would be voting on the amendment.
The amended motion was accepted by the second, so.
Okay.
So the motion that I have is Mr. Dwyer for chairman of this board for 1 calendar year.
If I could interject, I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mr. Petty for the position.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. So now we have 2 motions.
How does that work with the
Well,
rules?
we I don't have we haven't adopted Robert's rules. We have two motions. The first one that's made, we could have a vote on that. But I don't know, it seems like maybe you want to have more discussion on it since
Yeah.
there's dueling motions.
I would be in favor of that. I think we all, in fairness to everyone, we all ought to know as much as we can about each of the nominees before we vote on them.
Yeah, once you have a motion and a second, you can discuss for as long as you want.
So
So-
maybe a suggestion would be as these 2 gentlemen talk a little bit about
Is there any
themselves.
other? Is there any
I
other
was going to say,
person?
before you go any
Yeah.
further,
Is there any
does
other
anybody
person
else
that wants to make a motion? We have
want to
3
be
or
nominated?
4.
Well, you don't need no more. You can
No,
just.
I just want to
discuss.
make sure we don't pop up with a third. If we do all this talking and we come up with a third, I think if we're all comfortable that we got these 2 to choose from, all right. So now I guess we have a little conversation about the assets, what you bring to the table and share. Is that what you guys want to do?
I don't think he's accepted the nomination yet.
Oh,
I'm just a servant, period. So here's me.
Okay.
This is my background. I have chaired several boards around. I chair the Alzheimer's Association. I'm currently, if I had to give myself a title on the TIF Commission, I'm the one who is the adjutant to keep them on task. I sit on the task force for desegregation in the area. I sit on the Washington University Research Board for Alzheimer's. I am life coach, organizational consultant, pastor of church, and everything that goes along with that. I'm a friend to politicians and to help them remain sane. And so if serving is the opportunity to do it, I mean, easily I could do it, but I'm not running to do it, but I could certainly do it. And one thing for sure, I will keep everybody on task. So that would be the case. Even to a point, if it irritated someone, I would do that.
fair enough.
So I would second that. That if I were to wind up in the chair's position, my main objective would be to ensure that we run efficient meetings so that people don't get worn out and exhausted and apprehensive about the upcoming meetings. That would be the primary role. So in terms of credentials, I served I was a midnight appointee of Jim Conway to the Board of building appeals, and I served. I showed up for the first meeting as the new guy. I showed up for the second meeting, and I was the old guy. Everybody else had been dismissed, and they were all new appointees. They all thought I had been there for a while, so I was named chair. So, and I served in that role for 10 years. So that's an example of the kind of experience I would bring to the table. I also serve currently and have for quite some time as chair of the Central West End North Special Business District. And I could go on, but I don't think I need to. I have served as chair of numerous boards of all sorts, the Central West End Association and other quasi-governmental entities over the years. So I think we bring the same perspective to the role, and that is to ensure that each meeting is run well, efficiently.
So could I ask you something?
Yes.
Do you really want to do this?
Well, what I want is the meetings to be well run. So
No, I understand the reason why I'm asking.
I'm not running either. I am happy to do it.
No, I get that. I really do get that.
Mhm.
What I'm asking is that if you do, then.
Oh, I see. Am I reluctant or am I?
No. I'm being more definitive.
Yeah.
Do you really want to do this? If so, I'm all for it. That's why I'm asking you directly in that respect. If you're
Well, that's generous of you, and yes, I would like to do it.
And if you're ambivalent, then I'll say.
No, I am not ambivalent. That's where I was going.
Okay, well, that's the reason why I want you to say it.
Yeah.
You see how easy it is for me? I just want to hear you say it.
This is getting emotional.
I know.
So I am not ambivalent.
Okay, good. Okay,
So I think with that clear, we can take a vote.
Yeah.
On the first motion, would you like me to call a roll on the first motion?
I think we should call roll.
Okay, and this
I hope you guys agree.
motion number one, this was Mr. Dwyer for chair for 1 calendar year. And I will ask, as I call your name, that you would indicate aye or nay. Ms. Holland.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Gunter.
Aye.
Mr. Petty.
Aye.
Ms. Green.
Aye.
President Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Meyer.
Aye.
And Mr. Dwyer.
I'll pass.
Okay, well, the vote carries. So, Mr. Dwyer is chairman for 1 year. Do you want to elect a vice chairman in your absence that would be taking over?
I'd like to make the motion. Mr.
Petty.
Thank you. It would be the vice chairman.
For $500,000. Since we're giving them money, you know.
For $500,000, you second?
Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, we'll split a meal. Hold out for more.
That's a good idea.
So they got a
I'm
first
going to
and a
have to
second.
advise you that we don't have any funds for that.
So they got a first and a second.
Okay, any discussion? We'll go on to a roll call vote. Ms. Holland,
Aye.
Mr. Gunter,
Aye.
Mr. Petty, okay, Ms. Green,
Aye.
Ms. President Bradley,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
and Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Okay, so we have a vice chairman as well.
Oh, well, very nice.
Very good.
Gentlemen, thank you. Oh, gentlemen there.
Awesome.
Well, what do you think, Mr. Chairman? You're in charge now.
Well, all right, that was abrupt. I don't really have anything to add other than when the next meeting is set, I hope we're all here on time. It would be my practice to get the meeting going on time. I would like to imagine the agendas will vary, and therefore the amount of time we will require for each meeting might vary. But I'd like there to be a pattern, and I'd like there to be an expectation that when we come together, we're going to be prepared to do business. And when we speak, we should speak clearly and get our points across. And when someone is speaking, we should listen carefully and attempt to absorb everything we're hearing and get to consensus as quickly, as efficiently as we can.
Will the next meeting be located in this office?
I was going to say that if I could, Chairman. We're going to go downstairs to room 208. The Board of Aldermen use it. It'll have a long desk. Everybody have a seat behind the desk. There'll be a podium that'll look at you and they can speak. And the presenters and anybody who wants to show up will be in these seats, probably seats 100 people or so.
Right.
And so it's just downstairs in 208. The board uses it, so Jay will make sure we get that reserved.
And I'll offer a caveat just in case. I don't know what the schedule is at the moment in that room, so I will check and try and lock it down as soon as possible. If not, we will have a room that fits all the capabilities that were brought up earlier. So.
Yeah, and if that wouldn't work, our next best room's over at 1520
Right.
Market. Okay, we have a second floor where our LCRA, CDA groups and all that meet. It's a little fancier, nicer, but that's our backup room if we need one. So I would expect this next meeting to be significantly longer. I would hope it's not 2 hours, but I know it'll be over an hour. So I want you to be prepared for a good hour and a half of work. Whatever you'll make the meeting, whatever it is. So we'll get something out to you before Thanksgiving. We'll get you an agenda. We'll get you the packet. What else, Barb?
I have one other point before we go. It just occurred to me, and that goes back to the public relations issue that we brought up early about, I think it was you who brought it up, about talking to the media. It seems to me that we ought to consider the development of, if not a policy, an understanding that if we have occasion to speak with the media, that we take care to do it individually and speak for ourselves as individuals rather than for the board as a whole. And I think it would be, and perhaps your public relations experience would be helpful in shaping this, but I think that our policy ought to be that there is a designated spokesperson for the board. And I don't know how we get there, but I think conceptually that's something we should consider.
It's a great idea.
Barb, do you have a copy and paste? I mean, we got a lot of boards. Is there something like this out there that you could share with this group?
I don't know if every board has a media policy, but certainly every department does. I do not speak for the St. Louis City Councilor's Office. Julian Bush speaks for them. The health department is one of my clients. They have an information officer, so it's certainly very standard to do that. And I think that it's important for people to know when you're speaking as yourself as an individual and when you're speaking as the board.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can work on something that would create an understanding among us about how we're going to proceed in that arena.
So when we do the agenda, we want to make sure we put other items as an agenda item.
Yep.
So if they get something together, they can
Yes.
stick it on there.
Also like to note that the agenda process will be a collaborative effort now that we have an established chair and vice chair. Initially, that did not exist, so in order to kind of jumpstart this agenda was created. And with regards to opportunities, I think earlier you were touching on the crafting of the agenda. The board bill itself, as we've discussed, kind of spells out what is to come. So it's not a matter of us just creating it in some vacuum. The board bill kind of leads us in a direction that will present the presenters to speak to those items. But again, we would be in discussion with y'all about that agenda before.
So Jay, does that mean you'd send out a draft agenda
Right.
in short order here?
Right.
And give them time to review it a few days and then get responses back?
Correct.
And then clean it up for them?
Same with minutes. The initial distribution of minutes would be in draft form. Everybody would have an opportunity to weigh in. Collectively, we get to a conclusion, and then we would modify and adopt.
Absolutely.
Sounds like somebody needs to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You have no questions.
He's
I
been
don't
watching
know.
his watch for 10 minutes.
I second.
The city employees gave the first and the second. Do you see this?
We know how these meetings go. They'll last forever if you don't do this.
So, as the chairman, is there any discussion on that motion? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.